Go ahead.
Well, we just need to know who's actually going to be the one going for broke for the Orioles.
Well, I guess through all of this is Major League Baseball concerned. I mean, we laugh about it when we play games around here. You and I have talked for years and years, back to the point where Washington Nationals baseball was a pipe dream. But is Major League Baseball going to get involved where they literally don't know who to pick up and get on the phone in Baltimore to run the franchise, and there's no one running the franchise this week that we are aware of as fans?
Yeah, and that's just it. And I do think that there is concern with Major League Baseball as to who is running this organization, both overall and from a baseball operations standpoint. And from a baseball operations standpoint, obviously there's the open GM job as free agency begins in the open managerial slot. But more broadly, the league does have some concern as to who's actually running the organization, and would like to know if there needs to be some sort of change in designated control executive. A number of other organizations, most recently Washington, did that transfer from one generation to the next. Ted Lerner transferred day-to-day control of the Nationals to his son Mark Lerner, and I do think the league would like to know if now we're at that time where Peter Angelos needs to formally cede day-to-day control of the organization to his sons, or some other solution. But this ambiguity is not really helpful for anybody.
Well, and it's not helpful in luring candidates to come and work, right? Like, so globally, what we've seen from the Orioles, this incredible dysfunction for 25 years that I have chronicled, that I have sourced people like you and Boswell and everybody, going back to when Tim Kirkjian was covering the team and Ken Rosenthal and Buster Olney were running around the sun. Here we are in 2018. The team's lost 115 games. The team is stuck with this Chris Davis contract, and no one's running the team. Inside the industry, for them to be talking about Ben Cherington or Kim Ng coming in to run this team, I don't know how that's going to be possible for someone credible to take this gig.
Well, there's still only 30 jobs in this industry, and even amid this kind of ambiguity and dysfunction to which we're referring, there's still only a handful of these jobs, and these names that you mentioned, those would all be positives. These are competent people with track records of success in their prior stops in their careers. If they were to happen to land one of them, I would say that that's a step in the right direction. The question is whether they can actually close and do that, and I guess we're going to have to wait and see. But even amid the issues that we're talking about, being a major league GM is still something that a lot of people want to do, and there's way more demand than supply for that job.
One time, Eric, Peter Angelos, during the strike of '94, said, and I quoted him in the Peter Principles on this, if they want my team, they're going to have to come and take it from me. Because they had threatened about the replacement. This is 25 years ago. But it's fascinating now with all of this mass and money, which looks to be in excess of about $400 million of disputed money, depending on which way you look at it. And you've chronicled this over the course of the last decade, that Major League Baseball could become very aggressive, right? Like at various points with the Red Sox and the Marlins and the Expos, certainly with the Dodgers and, where they were with the McCourts. Certainly the NBA got aggressive with the Clippers. I think the NFL got aggressive last year with Jerry Richardson. We just left Carolina last week, and I heard all the stories about how quickly things happen there. Can you speak to Major League Baseball a little bit about how aggressive they might want or need to be to make the situation better here? Because, dude, I'm on the ground here. Things bleed really, really bad here from a business perspective of how it will ever come back and flourish. It will take local money that, quite frankly, I don't think exists in this marketplace, Eric.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're at sort of a full-on DEFCON situation here. I think right now it's just a matter of, okay, who's actually running the show, and do we need to make a change in designated control executive? If that continues to stay unresolved as we go into next season, maybe we get to another level here, but I think we're still at an earlier stage in the process. And the only recent corollary on this in terms of a active league involvement would be that McCourt situation where they were actually looting the team for money to fund their own, extravagant lifestyle. And that's where Bud Selig really got involved and seized control and designated the outside administrator to run the team and so forth. And we're just not at quite that level yet. And I get the frustration, and there was a terrible season, and the rebuilding hasn't even really begun. But I don't think we're at that kind of heavy involvement seizure kind of level of anything close to that. I think right now we're just waiting to see if there's going to be a change in designated control executive.
Eric Fisher's here. You can find him out at the Sports Business Journal and at Eric Fisher SBJ. No one has covered the intricacies of MASN and Major League Baseball and the business of baseball here locally, and the Washington Nationals certainly more than Eric has. He's been a go-to resource. So before I get into the World Series and Rob Manfred and attendance issues and even the Orioles, global issues that go around the sport with Adam Jones and everything that's going to happen in their offseason, the MASN thing sort of is the boil in all of this thing because it is so much money as it relates to Bryce Harper and the Nationals and the Orioles and Manny Machado and where the money is moving forward. Is there anything on the horizon with the MASN money as you see it? Because no one's covered that more closely than you have.
Yeah, so where we are on that, now that the season's over, sometime in November, we're going to have a new hearing before the internal MLB arbitration panel. That's the Revenue Sharing Definitions Committee. And the courts previously sent this matter back to the league. It was sort of a split decision of sorts where that coming back to the league instead of some other neutral third party, that was a win for the league and for the Nationals. That was the outcome that they wanted, that they really wanted to try to get this matter resolved in-house. What the Orioles and MASN have, though, is a direct line of appeal that they can go straight to the highest court in New York if there is some issue with those proceedings. And baseball is going to be, the Orioles and MASN are going to be looking at this very carefully because they were able to successfully prove that it was a sort of rigged game the last time, that they sort of trumped up the panel and it was a predetermined outcome. Baseball had a personal financial interest in the outcome, and they were able to get that prior ruling tossed out. So they're going to be watching sort of round two very carefully to see if there's any sort of similar impropriety. But there is going to be a new hearing. It's going to be happening in a matter of weeks, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, it's sort of baked into the cake, though, right? I mean, the more money that Mr. Angelos has to fork over, or his estate, to the Nationals is more money they have to fork over to Major League Baseball. It's sort of baked into the revenue sharing, right? So all that being said, the RSDC that I'm familiar with, that the audience isn't familiar with, has changed, though, right? The people that sit on that are different than it was 8 years ago, or whenever that was, the first time around when they said to Mr. Angelos, meet the Nationals, stroke them a check for $58 million a year, or whatever that number was, that didn't look like $24 million a year.
Yeah, so that was one of the issues that came up in the first RSDC hearing, that the owners that were, the other team owners that were on that panel had the same legal representation as did the league, as did the Washington Nationals. So there was all sorts of conflicts of interest. So what they've done, what the league has done to try to address that for round two here, and actually it was done some time ago, is that they've got new people on that board now. And so the three new members of that RSDC are Kevin Mather, the president of the Mariners, Mark Shapiro, the president and CEO of the Blue Jays, and Brewers owner Mark Atanasio. And none of them have the same sort of legal entanglements that the prior members did. And again, we'll see if that makes a difference. But we're going to have round two of the RSDC here in a matter of weeks.
They do play baseball on the field, and they did play a lot of it last week. Eric Fisher was going from Fenway Park to Dodger Stadium. I was a little envious, not on the cold nights in Boston, but certainly once you got to the palm trees over the weekend. I was not envious for the 3:30 a.m. game on Friday night. That is the stuff of legend, but a mixed bag as a season, right? I mean, good World Series, good postseason, sort of lousy regular season, the whole debate about, home runs and shifts and the game and how it's presented. I don't know if it's crisis level, Eric, but in my town, it's a crisis. In my town, where lacrosse is usurping kids, where people don't come to the city, where the stadium is empty, where the Nationals have usurped 75% of the money and maybe 65% of the fan base over the last 15 years, it's a crisis for my town. I don't know if Major League Baseball feels it's a crisis because they reach into their pockets and their pockets are flush with cash, right?
Well, there are some concerning signs that, we've had attendance go down here 5 out of the last 6 years. It's at its lowest point as it's been overall in 15 years. There are some teams at the top end, Yankees, Dodgers, Giants still, Red Sox, so forth, that are still doing well. But that middle and lower tier, not so much. And you reference sort of stylistic shifts in play, fewer balls in play, more strikeouts than hits for the first time ever. And there was a lot of big questions being asked around the game right now as to whether the game is sufficiently appealing to the next generation of fans. And so there's a lot of study going on around that. There's a lot of experiments being done in terms of new ticketing products, subscription-based passes, new standing areas at various ballparks. There's a lot of things being kind of trial and errored right now, and we'll see how that sort of plays out. But the numbers have certainly caught their attention. If it's not necessarily a full-blown crisis league-wide, it is certainly a growing concern.
Well, the biggest problem is, they got 50-year-old guys like you and me involved in this as well, where we've watched the game a certain way, and the game has now changed. And, from a statistical and analytical standpoint, great. It's a much more thinking man's game than it's ever been, and it was already the thinking man's game and all of that stuff. But now they've move this thing to a point where guys our age don't recognize it anymore with the shifts and the ball's not in play. And quite frankly, that the relief pitching in the postseason and the matchups, I don't enjoy baseball as much as I used to, and I'm the guy who has enjoyed it most of my life. Then does any of this appeal to a 20-year-old who's coming to baseball or trying to get involved in baseball for a lifetime? I think it's a lot more complex than maybe it even meets the eye, because they're losing some of the people they already have, which is their first challenge for me.
Yeah, and there's just more demands on everybody's time. There are more entertainment options. There are more things competing for everybody's leisure dollar, leisure time, and baseball's challenges are, to a certain extent, not any different than any other mature American sports league or global sports league, for that matter. But again, this is all happening against the backdrop of an on-field product that is changing very quickly, and to your point, is not terribly recognizable from even 5 years ago.
Eric Fisher, Sports Business Journal, joining us here, talking all things baseball, Orioles, woes, off-season. The Cuban kids coming over and the international signing money that Oriole fans didn't even know existed for a long period of time, and the promise of these players. In your experience in seeing these things and how franchises view analytics and how many human beings they're going to have with analytics and how they're going to handle the international market, this has been long thought of to be an Oriole problem that now at 115 losses and trying to change everything about the franchise, this is also something Oriole fans now talk about and say, when is our turn to get involved in all of this? Boy, baseball's gotten very, very complicated since the last time we paid attention, hasn't it?
Yeah, the international situation, because we don't have a worldwide draft, is still sort of a black box of sorts, that in terms of, yes, there are rules on how much money you have for signing and that sort of thing, but it's still not remotely as regulated as the standard Rule 5 draft that we have each June. And we're still at a situation where there's a wide variance in the ability and the acumen of teams to be able to exploit this area and be able to mine places like Japan and parts of Latin America for this talent. And until we get to a much more streamlined and regulated situation, I think we're going to continue to have these situations where one team is very out front, very aggressive, putting a lot of money in this direction, and other teams are far less so.
Well, when we see the Yankees and the Astros and the Red Sox and the Dodgers, and here come
even
the
the
Rays
Marlins
again.
Made a big signing. They got these two Victor brothers.
But on the field, to have success this year, it looks like the new model is absolutely the way to go because the Astros have done it so well. The Red Sox have done it definitely. Obviously, Theo Epstein's proven that model to some degree in Chicago at this point, that it is complicated and it is analytical and it does take a bunch of nerds in a room to try to concoct this, that the old way's never going to work again, right?
Yeah, and but there's still a bit of there's a lot of science to this, but it's still a lot of art because particularly in the case of some of these international players, you're picking up a kid who's 16, 17, 18 years old, is not come in the sort of normal, mature youth competitive landscape here in the United States. Skills are often much more raw. Life skills are often much more raw, and you're having to basically mold both a player and a man and try to turn him into a functional major leaguer. And then, again, there's a lot of science to that, but that's still going to take some art to be able to mold that into a fully functioning person and player.
What do you think's number one on Rob Manfred's, what keeps him up at night, about the sport? Because I saw him do an interview with MLB before, I guess it was Game 5, and I saw him on TV, and I'm like, I don't watch him speak much. Like, guys like you sort of follow him around and hear a lot what he has to say. Sometimes you get an audience with him. I know Maury Brown, my dear friend from out in Portland as well at Forbes. You sort of study him on the inside. I sort of fly by, and I'm much more inclined to hear what Goodell says than Manfred because it feels like Goodell talks more and is more out in front. But seeing Manfred a little bit, it seems so polished and so nervous to some degree, but it seems like they got a lot of problems in Major League Baseball for really the future of the next 10 or 15 years, and somebody really smart's going to have to be in that seat. I would think he's got a very, very difficult position here the next couple of years with trying to get the trajectory of baseball and how the country feels about it in a better place than where it is right now.
There's no question, and also against the backdrop of a darkening labor situation. Maybe that'll get better if this free agency period this winter looks more robust than it did last year. But after a whole generation of labor peace, you've got a union and a player base that is not as happy as it used to be. But in answer to your prior question, I think the number one thing that keeps them up at night is how to get to that 12, 14, 16-year-old kid and turn him into a fan. Because, when we were kids and we were going to ball games and we were absorbing all the box scores in the papers and living and dying by all this stuff, again, like I said before, there's so many other things competing for kids' times and all of our time now that sort of conversion of that kid into a lifelong fan, it's not as automatic as it was, not remotely so. And I think that's the big thing that keeps them awake at night.
Red Sox are pretty good, huh?
Well, you've finally got the situation where you've got, they're just the number one payroll team, but their core, Betts, Benintendi, and so forth, they're homegrown, and then they supplement it on top with guys like Martinez and Price and Sale and so forth. So it was really a very deft mixture of internal development, free agency, and trades. And nobody's ever really kind of hit all those tumblers at the same time, that you've got somebody matching wallet with brains, and you've had smart teams, you've had rich teams, but this is by far the most potent combination we've ever seen of all of the above at the same time. And it's good. They're going to be good for a while yet, because again, that core, particularly with Betts and Benintendi and Bradley and so forth, they're going to be around for a good long while, and we have not remotely seen the last of the Red Sox.
Eric Fisher, SBJ, is the way to follow him, as well as the Sports Business Journal. He does MLB media and technology. Last thing for you, I guess on a global sense for everything you do at Sports Business Journal, the backdrop of legalized gambling coming to your phone and to your app and to your Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, National Hockey League, NFL, college, or anything else you want to bet on. that is the biggest story in our culture for sports, right? Wagering on sports, and how this is going to work with the law, federal officials, and how the leagues are going to cash in on it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that we're really just at the beginning of the beginning here, that it's still only allowed in a handful of states. We haven't gone sort of through the rippling through the entire country. That's going to take some months and years to play itself out. We've just now started to have a situation where leagues like the NBA and the NHL are starting to do official partnerships with gambling operations. This is really just starting to emerge. And again, it's going to take some years to fully play itself out. But you look at what's happening in England and other parts of Europe where there's a mature betting situation, it is fully ingrained in part of the fan culture where people are going to place a bet they go to a game and they place a bet in the same way that they go buy a hot dog, or they do it at halftime while they're watching at the pub or something of that. It is
it's basically the racetrack. I was down at Laurel Park.
Totally.
You know, Laurel's. You know, you're down there and you walk to the back and you put $5 down on the 7-horse. And I guess in the 5th inning, if you want some action in the 6th inning, you'd say, "Hey, I'll take J.D. Martinez did a home run here on his next at bat. Give me $1 on that at I don't know 40 to 1 or whatever that thing would be." But that's probably where this thing's going. Big time, and baseball might be a beneficiary of this because we've been betting on baseball out in left field and doing $1 home run pool for 18 guys for $18 and having fun. People have been doing that for years, right? Literally.
Totally, and again, that's just beginning, but all sports, and certainly the major properties that already have a significant following, to your point, they all stand to benefit significantly. And that whole conversion where it gets ingrained in our fan culture in the same way it is in Europe, that's coming, and it's going to have major, major changes as to what it means to be a fan at a really core level.
Eric, appreciate you, man. Thanks for the time, as always. And I was very jealous when you were eating those Fenway Franks and Dodger dogs. But, hey, we're only, 5 months away from next season, right?
Yeah, had a lot of both of them. But, actually the 2019 essentially begins now with the advent of free agency.
We don't have anybody running our team right now, Eric. So it began with a laugh. I'll let you end it with a laugh, all right?
First things first. Yes, indeed.
I have to laugh or I'd cry. Free the birds, Eric Fisher. Great to have you on, buddy.
As always, thanks.
Eric Fisher, SBJ. No one will be covering the Masson Wars better or more thoroughly than he will be doing at Sports Business Journal. You can find him out on Twitter. You can find me probably drinking a Royal Farms coffee or probably eating fried chicken or the Western fries with dabs of ketchup. Make sure you're downloading the ROFO app or using the ROFO rewards card when you're pumping your gas at Royal Farms. You'll get your points. You get your Western fries for free. The only thing that makes them taste better, other than being piping hot, is when they're free. It's Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Also brought to you by our friends at Sporticulture. I have the beautiful flowers here that you can ship online. Go to sporticulture.com. Court grows them right out in Western, I should say Western Baltimore, but it's sort of Eastern Frederick. It's off of I-70. It's out in Howard County. He grows these flowers. He ships them everywhere. You can learn more about all they do at sporticulture.com. Also, our friends at the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks I trust with my real estate transactions. Selling my condo after 15 years. Needed a professional. Needed the best guy I could find to do it. I picked the Lee Tessier team. You'll do the same thing. You'll see. Go to LeeTessier.com and learn why they've been locating the finest properties and negotiating the best deals. I got to know Lee through my wife's battle with leukemia as the man of the year with LLS. Go to LeeTessier.com and learn about all that he does. I'm out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Nasty at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.